My boyfriend slept with every friend I trusted. Then one message changed everything. I didn't notice it at first, not really, because nothing about it looked obvious. Nothing screamed danger. Nothing felt like betrayal. It just felt like small, uncomfortable coincidences stacking up in ways I kept brushing off, because trusting him felt easier than questioning everything I thought I knew. It started with Lena. She had been my friend for years, the kind of friend who showed up unannounced with takeout and stayed too late just talking about life, the kind of friend who knew my routines, my habits, my little insecurities I never said out loud. And when I introduced her to him, I remember feeling proud, like I had somehow built a life worth sharing. He was charming that night, more than usual, attentive, funny, just the right amount of teasing, the kind of energy that made people lean in without realizing it. And I remember watching them talk in the kitchen while I grabbed drinks, thinking how easily he fit into my world, how natural it all felt. I didn't think anything of it when she texted me less the next week, or when she canceled plans, or when her replies became shorter, colder, like there was something sitting behind her words that she refused to say. People get busy, I told myself. Life happens. But then she stopped answering completely. No explanation, no argument, no fallout, just gone. And I hated how much that bothered me. I asked him once, casually, if he thought Lena had seemed off that night. He shrugged, barely looking up from his phone. Maybe she's just dealing with something. That was it. Simple, clean, dismissive. And I accepted it, because questioning him felt like overthinking, and I didn't want to be that person, the paranoid girlfriend, the one who creates problems where there aren't any. So I let it go. Until it happened again. This time, it was one of my students, Maya. She was bright, outspoken, the kind of student who stayed after class to ask questions not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared. And over time, we built a comfortable dynamic, respectful but warm, the kind that made teaching feel meaningful. One afternoon, she mentioned needing help with a project. I offered to let her come by. It wasn't unusual. I had done it before with other students, keeping things professional, structured, safe. When she came over, he was home. Of course he was. He always seemed to be there at the exact wrong moments, though I didn't think of it that way back then. He greeted her politely, nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious, just that same effortless charm, that same easy confidence that made people relax around him faster than they should. We worked at the dining table for about an hour. At some point, I stepped away to take a call. It wasn't long, maybe 10 minutes. When I came back, they were laughing. Not loudly, not in a way that felt wrong, just comfortable. Too comfortable. Maya left shortly after. She thanked me, smiled, everything normal, but the next day she didn't show up to class. Then she stopped submitting assignments. Then she disappeared completely. No emails, no responses, just gone. The same way Lena had been. That's when something small, quiet, and unsettling started to take shape in the back of my mind. A question I didn't want to fully form, a pattern I didn't want to acknowledge. But still, I pushed it down. Coincidence, I told myself again. It had to be, because the alternative didn't just mean something was wrong with him, it meant something was wrong with my entire life, and I wasn't ready to face that. Weeks passed. Things felt normal again, or at least I convinced myself they were, until my colleague, Erin, came over one evening. She wasn't just a coworker. She was someone I trusted, someone sharp enough to read people quickly, someone who didn't miss things the way I seemed to. I remember hesitating before inviting her, not for any clear reason, just a feeling, a quiet resistance I couldn't explain. But I ignored it, because that's what I had been doing all along, ignoring things, dismissing instincts, choosing comfort over truth. That night followed the same pattern. He was attentive, charming, just slightly too interested, and I noticed it this time. The way his attention lingered, the way his tone shifted, the way he made people feel seen a little too quickly, a little too deeply. Erin noticed too. I could tell, not from anything she said, but from the way her eyes sharpened, the way she observed more than she spoke. When she left, she hugged me a little tighter than usual. "Call me if you need anything," she said. It felt loaded, but I didn't ask what she meant, because a part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. The next morning, she texted me. Just one message. "We need to talk." My chest tightened immediately. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good, all of them circling around the same fear I had been avoiding. I replied, asking what was wrong. She didn't answer right away. Hours passed. Then finally, not over text. That's when the unease turned into something heavier, something real, something I could no longer ignore. Because deep down, I already knew, whatever she was about to tell me was going to change everything. I met Erin the next day at a small cafe across town, the kind of place that was always just quiet enough to feel private, but never empty enough to feel uncomfortable. And I remember getting there early, sitting at a corner table, checking my phone every few seconds, like somehow staring at the screen would make the truth arrive softer. It didn't. When Erin walked in, she didn't smile. That was the first thing that felt wrong. She was always the kind of person who carried warmth into a room without trying, but that day, her energy was different, guarded, careful, like she was holding something heavy and didn't know how to set it down. She sat across from me, exhaled slowly, and for a second, neither of us spoke. "Just tell me," I said, before I could lose the nerve. She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any words could have. "I don't want you to think I'm trying to start something," she began, her voice low, controlled. "But something about him isn't right." My stomach dropped, not because I hadn't thought it, but because hearing someone else say it made it real. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already felt the answer pressing against my chest. She glanced around briefly, then leaned in slightly. "The way he talks to people, it's calculated," she said, choosing her words carefully. "He adapts too quickly, like he's reading you and becoming exactly what you respond to." I forced out a small laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to deflect something uncomfortable. "He's just good with people." Erin didn't react. That's when the denial started to feel weak, even to me. "I've met good with people," she said quietly. "This isn't that." I stayed silent, because now I was listening. "Last night, when you stepped away," she continued, her eyes locking onto mine, "he started asking me very personal questions." My chest tightened. "What kind of questions?" "At first, normal things," she said. "Then it shifted, slowly, like he was testing boundaries, asking about relationships, past experiences, what I value in trust, what I'd tolerate, what I wouldn't." That didn't sound like him. Or maybe it sounded exactly like him, and I had just never noticed. "And then?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Erin paused. "And then he started mirroring everything I said," she replied, agreeing with me too perfectly, finishing my thoughts, making it feel like we were aligned. A cold, creeping feeling spread through me, because that sounded familiar, too familiar. "He didn't cross a line," she added quickly, not directly, but it felt like he was building toward something, like he was laying the groundwork. "For what?" I asked. She held my gaze for a second before answering. "For trust he hasn't earned." That sentence hit harder than I expected, because suddenly everything started connecting in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. Lena, Maya, the silence, the distance, the disappearances. "What are you trying to say?" I whispered. Erin exhaled, like she had been holding this in for too long. "I think he does this often," she said. "I think he gets close to people around you, earns their trust quickly, and then something happens." My throat felt dry. "What kind of something?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't think it's harmless." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too loud, too suffocating. "I think you should talk to Lena," she added gently. "I tried," I said quickly, almost defensively. She stopped responding. Erin nodded. "Then maybe there's a reason she doesn't want to talk." That didn't comfort me. It made everything worse. I left that cafe feeling like the ground beneath my life had shifted slightly, not enough to collapse everything, but enough to make every step feel uncertain. And yet, when I got home, I still wasn't ready to confront him, because confrontation meant answers, and answers meant there was no going back. He was sitting on the couch when I walked in, scrolling through his phone like everything was normal, like my world wasn't quietly unraveling. "Hey," he said casually, glancing up. "How was your day?" I studied him for a second, looking for something, anything, a sign, a crack. But there was nothing, just the same familiar face, the same calm presence, the same man I thought I knew. "It was fine," I said, and just like that, I lied. That night I barely slept. Every memory replayed differently now. Every interaction felt off, like I had been watching the same story but suddenly understood the hidden plot underneath it. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed proof, not feelings, not suspicions, proof. So I did something I never thought I would do. I checked his phone. It wasn't locked, it never was, because people who have nothing to hide don't guard their devices, and people who are very good at hiding things don't need to. At first, everything looked normal. Messages, social media, nothing obvious. And for a brief moment, I felt stupid, paranoid, exactly the way I had been trying to avoid feeling, until I opened his archived chats. That's where it started to fall apart. Names I recognized, some I didn't. Conversations that felt wrong, too personal, too intimate, too calculated. But what made my hands start shaking wasn't just the flirting, it was the pattern, the same opening lines, the same progression, the same emotional hooks, like he was following a script. And then I saw something that made my chest tighten so hard I couldn't breathe properly. Photos, not explicit, but suggestive enough, enough to tell a story, enough to confirm what I had been avoiding. My heart was pounding now, loud, heavy, relentless. And then I saw Lena's name. My finger hovered over the screen for a second. Then I opened it. The messages weren't long, but they were enough. Flirty, personal, familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. But the last message is what broke something inside me. "We shouldn't tell her, it'll only hurt her more." I stared at those words for what felt like forever, because in that moment, it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a decision, a choice, a secret they had agreed to keep, behind my back, inside my life, inside my home. And suddenly, everything Erin said stopped sounding like suspicion and started sounding like the beginning of something much worse. "I didn't confront him right away," Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to steady the storm building inside my chest before it spilled out in a way I couldn't control. So I put his phone back exactly where I found it, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to make sense of what I had just seen. My hands were still shaking, my mind running in circles, replaying that one message over and over again. We shouldn't tell her. It'll only hurt her more. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the tone. Casual. Decided. Like I wasn't a person in the situation, just a problem to manage. I don't know how long I sat there before he walked in, but the moment he did, I felt it. That shift. That awareness that everything had changed, even if he didn't know it yet. "You okay?" he asked, noticing me sitting still. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I didn't see comfort. I saw a stranger. "We need to talk," I said. His expression didn't change, not even a flicker. "About what?" That calmness almost made me second-guess myself. Almost. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding harder with every second. "About Lena," I said. There it was, the first test, the first crack. He blinked once, just enough to register the name, then shrugged lightly. "What about her?" "Too casual, too clean. She stopped talking to me after meeting you," I said carefully, watching him closely, "and I just saw your messages." Silence. A brief one, but not empty. Calculated. Then he exhaled softly, shaking his head like he was disappointed. Not in himself, in me. "You went through my phone?" he said, his tone shifting slightly. There it was again, the deflection, the redirection, the way he turned the focus away from what he did to what I did. "I wouldn't have needed to if there was nothing to find," I replied. For a second, something flashed across his face. Not guilt, annoyance. Then it disappeared just as quickly. "Nothing happened," he said flatly. My stomach twisted. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not," he replied, stepping closer, his voice calm, controlled. "You're taking things out of context." Out of context, the most convenient phrase in the world. "What context makes that okay?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. He sighed, running a hand through his hair like this was exhausting for him. "Lena was going through something," he said. "She needed someone to talk to. And yeah, maybe things got a little too personal, but it wasn't what you think." That sounded almost believable. Almost. And that's what made it dangerous, because it gave me something to hold on to, a version of reality that hurt less. "You told her not to tell me," I said quietly. He paused, just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. "I didn't want to stress you out over nothing," he said smoothly. "You've already been overwhelmed lately." There it was again, that subtle shift, turning it into concern, turning himself into the one protecting me. I felt my grip on certainty slipping, just slightly, and he saw it. Of course he did. He stepped closer, his voice softening. "You're overthinking this," he said gently. "You do that sometimes." My chest tightened, because that wasn't entirely false, and he knew it. He always knew exactly which parts of the truth to use against me. "What about Maya?" I asked suddenly. That caught him off guard, not enough to lose control, but enough to notice. "What about her?" "She disappeared after coming here," I said steadily, my voice steadying again, just like Lena. "That's a stretch," he replied quickly. "You're connecting things that aren't related." Am I? That question hit harder than I expected, because for a brief moment, I wasn't sure anymore, and that was the most dangerous place to be. Half certain, half doubting, easy to manipulate. He stepped even closer now, lowering his voice. "I get why you're upset," he said, "but you're building something in your head that isn't real." Not real. The words echoed in my mind, and for a second, I felt it, that pull back toward him, that familiar safety, that version of him I wanted to believe in. But then, Lena's message flashed in my head again, clear, undeniable, a secret they chose to keep, and suddenly the fog started to lift. "No," I said quietly. He frowned slightly. "What?" "This isn't in my head," I continued, taking a step back, creating space between us. "You lied." His expression hardened, just slightly. "I didn't lie." "You hid it," I snapped. "You made a decision with her about me without me." "That's not the same thing," he replied quickly. "It is to me." Silence fell between us, heavy, tense, and for the first time, his calm started to crack. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, his voice sharper now. There it was, the shift, the mask slipping. "Am I?" I challenged. "Yes," he said firmly, "and if you keep pushing this, you're going to ruin something good over nothing." That sentence landed differently. Not defensive, not apologetic, a warning, subtle but clear, and something about that made my stomach drop, because it didn't sound like someone trying to fix things, it sounded like someone trying to control the outcome. "I think you've already ruined it," I said quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed, soft, almost disbelieving. "You really think I'd risk everything for something meaningless?" he asked. That question hung in the air, because it forced me to consider something worse. What if it wasn't meaningless? What if this wasn't random? What if this was intentional, planned, repeated? A pattern? "How many?" I asked suddenly. He blinked. "What?" "How many people?" I repeated, my voice steady now, stronger than before. "How many of my friends have you done this with?" His jaw tightened. "That's not a fair question." That was answer enough. A cold, heavy realization settled in my chest. This wasn't one mistake. It wasn't even a few. It was something bigger, something I had been living inside without realizing it. "You need to drop this," he said, his tone low now, serious. "For your own good." My heart skipped. For my own good? He held my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen in him before. Not charm, not warmth, not even anger. Control. "You don't understand everything that's going on," he continued carefully, "and digging into things you don't fully understand can backfire." A chill ran down my spine. That wasn't concern, that was a threat. Quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. And in that moment, I realized something that made everything feel even more dangerous than before. This wasn't just about cheating. This wasn't just about betrayal. There was something else, something deeper, something he didn't want me to find. And whatever it was big enough for him to risk everything to keep it hidden. I didn't argue with him after that. Not because I believed him, but because I finally understood something that changed the way I had to move. Confronting him directly wasn't going to give me the truth. It was only going to make him hide it better. So I did the one thing he wasn't expecting. I stopped pushing, at least on the surface. That night, I acted normal, or as close to normal as I could manage. I responded when he spoke, kept my tone even, didn't bring anything up again, and I could feel him watching me, measuring my reactions, waiting for another outburst that never came. And slowly, I saw it, the shift in him, the way he relaxed, the way his guard dropped just slightly. Because in his mind, he had regained control, but what he didn't know was that I had already stepped out of it. The next morning, I started with Lena. I didn't call, I didn't text again. Instead, I showed up. Her apartment building looked exactly the same, which felt strange considering how different everything felt now, like the world hadn't caught up to what I had just discovered. When she opened the door, the look on her face said everything. Shock. Then panic. Then something else. Guilt. "Why are you here?" she asked quickly, stepping halfway outside like she didn't want me seeing inside. "I need to talk to you," I said. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked behind her for a split second, like she was checking something. Or someone. That alone made my chest tighten. "Now's not a good time," she said. "When is it ever a good time to tell the truth?" I replied. That hit. I saw it land. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she didn't have the energy to keep pretending. 5 minutes, she muttered, stepping aside. I walked in. Everything felt normal. Too normal. Like whatever had happened hadn't left a visible mark, even though I could feel it sitting between us, heavy and unspoken. We stood in the living room, neither of us sitting, neither of us comfortable. "Did you sleep with him?" I asked. No build-up, no softening, just the truth straight through. She closed her eyes, just for a second, and that was all the confirmation I needed. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quietly. That sentence felt like something inside me cracked. Not shattered, just shifted, because hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. "How?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated again, and this time it wasn't just guilt, it was fear. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, almost defensively. "He didn't just come on to me." "Then what was it like?" I pushed. She swallowed. "He listens," she said, her voice low. "Like really listens, like he understands things you didn't even say out loud." That sounded familiar, too familiar. "And then?" I asked. "And then he makes you feel safe," she continued, "like you can trust him with things you wouldn't tell anyone else." My chest tightened, because I knew exactly what she meant. "And then?" I asked again, quieter now. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something raw in her expression. "He uses it," she whispered. Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. "How?" I asked. Her hands trembled slightly as she crossed her arms. "He remembers everything," she said. "Every insecurity, every secret, every moment you felt vulnerable, and then he brings it back at the right time." A cold, creeping realization started forming in my mind. "What do you mean, the right time?" Her voice dropped even lower. "When you start pulling away," she said, "or when you hesitate, or when you question him, he reminds you of things you told him, things you're ashamed of, things you don't want anyone else to know." My stomach dropped. "That's not just manipulation," I said slowly. She shook her head. "No," she replied. "It's worse." My heart started pounding again. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to a drawer, hesitated for a second, then pulled something out. Her phone. She unlocked it, scrolled, then handed it to me. "Look," she said. My hands felt heavier as I took it. The screen showed a message thread, his name at the top. I scrolled, and what I saw made my chest tighten. Messages that weren't just flirty, they were controlling, calculated. "You don't want her finding out, do you? You told me things that would ruin you if they got out. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I felt my breath catch. "This isn't just cheating," I said, barely above a whisper. "No," Lena replied, her voice breaking slightly. "It's not." I kept scrolling, and then I saw it, a video file. My fingers froze. "What is this?" I asked. She didn't answer, didn't need to, because I already knew. Slowly, I tapped it. The video loaded. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. It was enough. Enough to show what had happened. Enough to prove everything. Enough to be used against her. I felt sick, actually sick, like the air had been pulled out of the room. "He records people?" I asked, my voice shaking now. She nodded. "Not always obvious," she said. "Sometimes it's just audio. Sometimes it's worse." My grip tightened around the phone. "How many people?" I asked. She didn't know, but she knows I'm not the only one. That's when everything shifted, from betrayal to something darker, something dangerous. "He's been doing this for a while," she continued, "and I think he targets people close to you on purpose." My head snapped up. "What?" She nodded slowly. "Because it gives him access," she said. "Because people trust you, so they trust him faster." That realization hit like a punch to the chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned, strategic, and I had been the center of it without even realizing. "He told me not to tell you," she added quietly. "I know," I said. Silence fell again, but this time it felt different, not just heavy, clear, sharp, focused. "What do we do?" she asked. That question hung in the air, because now this wasn't just my problem. It wasn't just her problem. It was something bigger, something that could ruin more than just relationships, something that could destroy lives. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't confused. I wasn't doubting myself. I wasn't hesitating, because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And more importantly, I knew I wasn't alone. "We stop him," I said. And as those words left my mouth, I realized something else. This wasn't the moment my life was ruined. This was the moment I took it back. Walking out of Lena's apartment felt different than walking in. When I arrived, I was searching for answers, still holding on to fragments of doubt, still hoping there was some version of this that wasn't as bad as it seemed. But when I left, there was no doubt anymore, only clarity, and something else growing underneath it. Anger. Not loud, explosive anger. Something colder, sharper, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that plans. By the time I got home, I already knew one thing for sure. I couldn't do this alone. And more importantly, I shouldn't. He was in the kitchen when I walked in, leaning casually against the counter like nothing in the world had shifted, like he hadn't just been exposed in a way that could unravel everything he built. "Hey," he said, glancing up. "You've been out a while." I nodded, setting my bag down, keeping my expression neutral. "Just needed some air." He studied me for a second. Not obvious, subtle, but I saw it now. The way he observed, measured, adjusted. Before, I would have missed it. Now, it stood out like a warning sign. "You seem better," he said. That almost made me laugh. Better, if only he knew. "Yeah," I replied simply. "I think I just overreacted yesterday." There it was, the lie, and I hated how easily it came out. But I needed him comfortable. I needed him careless, because that was the only way this would work. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Not enough for someone else to notice, but enough for me." "That's what I was trying to tell you," he said, his tone softening again. "You get in your head sometimes." I nodded, played along, because for the first time, I understood exactly how his game worked, and I was about to use it against him. That night, I didn't push anything, didn't question him, didn't bring up Lena. Instead, I watched, closely, the way he used his phone, the way he angled the screen slightly away without making it obvious, the way certain notifications made him react faster than others, and, most importantly, the way he assumed I wasn't paying attention anymore. That was his mistake. The next step was reaching out. Not randomly, not emotionally, carefully. I started with Maya. It took me hours to even decide what to say, because now I understood something I didn't before. If Lena had been scared, Maya might be too. So I kept it simple. "Hey, I know something isn't right. You don't have to explain everything, but I need to know if he contacted you after you came over." I stared at the message before sending it. Then finally, I hit send, and waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. Fear doesn't respond quickly. But later that night, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "How much do you know?" My chest tightened, because that question alone told me everything. "Enough to know you're not the only one," I replied. 3 dots appeared instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again, like she was trying to decide something. Finally, I didn't want to get involved. That hurt more than I expected, not because I blamed her, but because it meant this had been happening in silence for longer than I realized. "You didn't. He pulled you into it," I replied. A pause. Then, "He has videos." There it was again. Confirmation. Consistent. Real. My grip tightened around my phone. "I know," I typed. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "I thought you knew." That message hit differently, because it meant something worse than betrayal. It meant perception. He had made it seem like I was part of it, or at least aware of it. "I didn't," I replied. And for a moment, there was nothing. Then, "I'll talk to you, but not there." That was enough. That was more than enough. Because now it wasn't just Lena. It wasn't just one situation. It was a pattern, a network, and it was starting to come together. Over the next few days, everything became a careful balance. On the outside, I stayed the same, calm, normal, unbothered. But underneath, everything was moving, quietly, strategically. I met Maya in a public place. She looked different, not physically, but in the way she carried herself. Guarded, careful, like she had learned something the hard way. He knows how to pick people, she said early into the conversation, her voice low. People who won't speak up easily. That made sense. Too much sense. He studies you first, she continued, through you, through your stories, through how people interact with you. A chill ran through me, because that meant everything I had shared, every detail about my life had been used as a map. He knew things about me before I even told him, things you must have mentioned at some point. I swallowed hard, guilt creeping in. I'm sorry, I said. She shook her head quickly. You didn't know. No, I didn't, but that didn't make it easier. What exactly happened? I asked carefully. She hesitated, then exhaled. He didn't force anything, she said. That's what makes it worse. I nodded slowly, because I understood now. It felt like a choice, she continued, like I wanted it, until later when I realized how much he had set it up. Manipulation, layered, subtle, effective. And the videos? I asked. Her jaw tightened. I didn't know at first, she said, but when I started pulling away, he showed me. That same pattern again, control through fear. How many others? I asked. I've seen at least 3, she replied. 3 that we knew of, which meant there were probably more. By the time I left that meeting, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused, because now we had something powerful. Not just stories, not just suspicions, consistency, evidence, a pattern that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. But there was one problem, a big one. He wasn't stupid, and people like him don't stay unaware long. That realization hit me the moment I walked back into the apartment that night. He was sitting there again, waiting, and the way he looked at me this time was different. Not relaxed, not careless, aware. You've been busy lately, he said slowly. My heart skipped, just once, but I kept my face steady. Just catching up on things, I replied. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual, like he was searching for something, and in that moment, I understood the risk. If he figured this out too soon, everything we were building could fall apart. Worse, he could turn it against us. You sure that's all? He asked. There it was again, the pressure, subtle but growing. I nodded. Yeah. A pause. Then he smiled, but this time it didn't feel the same. Good, he said quietly, and something about the way he said it made it clear he didn't fully believe me, and that meant one thing. We were running out of time. After that night, everything changed. Not on the surface. If someone looked at us from the outside, nothing would seem different. We still moved around each other the same way, still shared the same space, still spoke in calm, measured tones, still played the part of something normal. But underneath, there was tension. Sharp, constant, the kind that sits in your chest and never fully settles. Because now, it wasn't just me watching him, he was watching me too. And the worst part was, he was good at it. Subtle, patient, the same way he had been with everyone else. The next morning, it started small. Who were you texting last night? He asked casually, not even looking up from his coffee. Too casual, too random. I kept my tone light. Just work stuff. A pause. Then, at midnight? There it was. A test. I shrugged slightly. Deadlines don't care about time. He hummed softly, like that answer was acceptable, but I could feel it. He was noting things, logging them, the same way he had done with everyone else. Only now, I was the one being studied. I left shortly after that, not because I had somewhere urgent to be, but because staying in that space felt like standing in the middle of something slowly closing in. I needed distance. I needed to think. I met up with Lena and Maya again later that day. This time, it wasn't just sharing stories, it was strategy. We don't have enough yet, Maya said, her voice low, eyes scanning the room out of habit now. We have patterns, Lena added, but we need something undeniable. They were right. Stories could be dismissed, twisted, turned into misunderstandings. But proof? Proof couldn't. What about the videos? I asked. Lena shook her head. He doesn't keep them where you'd expect, she said. I tried finding them once after everything, but they weren't on his phone. That didn't surprise me. Someone that careful wouldn't leave something like that exposed. Cloud storage? I suggested. Or something external, Maya added. Hidden, protected. I thought back to everything I had seen. The way he used his phone. The way certain notifications stood out. There are apps he uses that don't show up normally, I said slowly. Archived chats, hidden folders. He knows how to bury things. Silence settled over us for a moment, because we all understood what that meant. Getting that proof wouldn't be easy, and it definitely wouldn't be safe. We need access, Maya said. To what? Lena asked. To wherever he keeps everything, she replied. That was the problem. We didn't know where that was. But I had one advantage. I lived with him, which meant I had proximity, and proximity meant opportunity. I'll find it, I said. Both of them looked at me, concern immediately written across their faces. "That's risky," Lena said quickly. "I know," I replied. "No, you don't," she pushed, her voice tightening slightly. "You didn't see how he reacts when he feels cornered." "I saw enough," I said quietly. And I had. That moment in the apartment, the shift in his tone, the warning hidden inside calm words. I knew exactly what he was capable of now, but that didn't change what needed to be done. If we don't get it, he keeps doing this, to other people, maybe worse. That landed, because this wasn't just about us anymore. It never really was. Maya exhaled slowly. "Then we do it carefully," she said. "Very carefully," Lena added. And just like that, the plan wasn't just forming, it was set in motion. That night, I went back home with one goal: observe everything. Not just him, everything around him. His habits, his routines, the things I had ignored before. And it didn't take long to notice something new. A small detail, easy to miss, but now, impossible to ignore. Every night, around the same time, he would step away. Not for long, 5, maybe 10 minutes, always with his phone, always alone. At first, I thought it was nothing, a habit, a routine. But then I noticed something else. He never did it in the same place twice. Sometimes the bedroom, sometimes the bathroom, sometimes near the hallway, like he was avoiding patterns or hiding one. That was my opening. The next night, I paid closer attention, waited, watched, and when he stepped away again, I followed, quietly. Not close enough to be obvious, but enough. The bathroom door was slightly closed, not fully, just enough to block the view, but not the sound. I stood there for a second, my heart pounding louder than anything else, trying to steady my breathing so I could actually hear what was happening inside. At first, nothing. Then, his voice. Low, controlled, different. "Yeah, she's starting to ask questions," he said. My chest tightened instantly. "She doesn't have anything solid," he continued, "just suspicions." A pause, like he was listening. Then, "No, she won't go to anyone without proof." Another pause. Then something that made my stomach drop. "I've handled worse." Silence filled my ears after that. Heavy, loud, deafening, because that one sentence confirmed everything. This wasn't new to him. This wasn't a one-time situation. This was a pattern he had done before, successfully. My heart was racing now, adrenaline kicking in, because I wasn't just dealing with someone manipulative. I was dealing with someone experienced, careful, and now aware. I stepped back quietly before he could notice anything, returned to the living room, sat down, tried to steady my breathing. Seconds later, he walked out, and the moment his eyes landed on me, I knew. Something had shifted again. "You okay?" he asked. Same question, different weight. "Yeah," I replied. He studied me, longer this time, more direct. And then, "Funny," he said slowly, "I was about to ask you the same thing." A chill ran down my spine, because that didn't feel like concern. It felt like alignment, like he knew we were both playing the same game now, just on different sides. And in that moment, one thing became painfully clear. We weren't just gathering evidence anymore. We were running out of time. After that night, I stopped thinking in terms of if. Everything became when. When he would figure out how much I knew. When he would make a move. When this would stop being quiet and start becoming dangerous. And the worst part was, I didn't know which side would get there first. So I moved faster. Carefully, but faster. The next day, I didn't go to work. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He didn't question it, but the way he looked at me before leaving lingered. Like he didn't fully believe me. Like he was deciding something. The moment the door closed behind him, I didn't waste time. I started with the obvious. His laptop. Password protected. Not surprising, but I had seen him type it enough times to guess the pattern. It took 3 tries. My heart was pounding harder with each failed attempt. On the 4th, it opened. I exhaled sharply, not realizing I had been holding my breath. At first glance, everything looked normal. Files, work folders, nothing out of place. But I wasn't looking for obvious anymore. I was looking for hidden. And people like him never leave things where they can be easily found. So I checked deeper. System folders, hidden files, anything that didn't belong. Minutes passed, then nearly an hour. Nothing. And for a second, frustration crept in. Until I remembered something Maya said. He doesn't keep things where you expect. So I stopped looking for files and started looking for access points, apps, programs, anything that didn't match the rest. That's when I saw it. A small, almost invisible icon buried among other applications. No name, no label, just a blank square. My chest tightened, because that wasn't normal. I hovered over it for a second, then clicked. Nothing happened, at least not visibly, but something felt off, like it had responded without showing it. I tried again. This time, a small prompt appeared. Password required. Of course. I stared at it, my mind racing. What would he use? Not something obvious, not something tied to him directly. Something meaningful but hidden. I thought back to everything I knew about him, the way he worked, the way he chose his words, calculated, layered. Then something clicked. Not a date, not a name, a phrase, something he had said before. Control is about timing. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard, then slowly I typed it in, entered. For a second, nothing. Then the screen changed, and my entire body went cold. Folders, dozens of them, labeled in ways that didn't make sense at first. Initials, dates, codes. But I didn't need to open them to understand what I was looking at. I already knew. Still, I clicked one, my hands shaking now. Inside, videos, audio files, screenshots, conversations, everything. Organized, documented, controlled, like a system. Not random, not messy, precise, intentional. My stomach turned. Because this wasn't just something he did, this was something he had built. A method, a process, a pattern he repeated over and over again. I clicked another folder, different name, same structure. Another, same thing. And then I saw one that made my chest tighten so hard I had to stop breathing for a second. My name. Not just my name, a folder with my name on it. My fingers froze, because suddenly this wasn't just about everyone else. It was about me too. Slowly, I opened it. Inside, photos, videos, messages. Not just of me, of people around me. My friends, my students. Clips, moments, things I didn't even realize had been captured. My heart started racing uncontrollably now, because the realization hit all at once. I wasn't just the connection. I wasn't just the access point. I was part of the system, the center of it. Everything I trusted, everything I shared, everything I brought into my life, he had used, cataloged, stored, controlled. A noise outside snapped me out of it. A door, closing. My heart stopped. He wasn't supposed to be back yet. Panic hit instantly, sharp, overwhelming. I closed the folder quickly, exited the program, shut the laptop, my hands moving faster than my thoughts. Footsteps, closer. My breathing felt too loud, too obvious. I forced myself to move, calmly, not rushed, not panicked. I stepped away from the desk just as the door opened. He walked in, and the moment his eyes landed on me, I knew. He wasn't supposed to be here. "You said you weren't feeling well," he said slowly. My heart was still racing, but I kept my voice steady. "I needed water." A pause. His eyes flicked briefly toward the laptop, then back to me. And in that moment, everything felt like it was balancing on the edge of something about to collapse. "You went on my computer?" he asked. Not accusing, not yet, but close. I shook my head. "No." Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then he stepped closer, slow, measured, and I felt it again, that shift, that awareness. "You're a terrible liar," he said quietly. My chest tightened. Because now, this wasn't a game anymore. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. And the way he was looking at me now wasn't calm, wasn't controlled. It was something else. Something darker. "You should have listened when I told you to stop digging," he continued, his voice low. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to move, to leave, to do something. But I stayed still, because reacting wrong right now could make everything worse. "You don't understand what you just got yourself into," he said. That same line again, but this time it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a decision. And in that moment, I realized something that made everything even more dangerous than before. He wasn't trying to hide it anymore. For a second, neither of us moved. The air between us felt tight, like something invisible had snapped, and neither of us knew what the next second would look like. He knew. Not everything, but enough. And I knew something even more important. I couldn't stay in that apartment. Not anymore. Not after what I had just seen. Not after the way he was looking at me now. "You should have trusted me," he said quietly. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "Trusted you?" I repeated, my voice steady despite everything happening inside me. "You've been recording people." His expression didn't change, which was worse than denial, because it meant he wasn't even pretending anymore. "You weren't supposed to find that," he replied. There it was. Not "it's not true," not "you're wrong," just "you weren't supposed to know." My chest tightened. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked, my voice rising now, unable to hold it back anymore. "You think that's the problem?" "You're reacting emotionally," he said, cutting in, calm again, controlled, like he had flipped a switch. "And that's exactly why I told you to stop digging." That same tone, that same control, even now, even after everything. And something about that snapped whatever fear was left inside me. "No," I said firmly, taking a step back, creating space. "This ends now." A pause. Then he smiled. But it wasn't the same smile I used to know. This one felt empty, cold. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he asked. That sentence hit different, because it wasn't about the relationship anymore. It was about something else, something bigger. I already have, I said, another step back, closer to the door. He noticed, of course he did. You really don't understand, he said slowly, his voice dropping lower now. You're in this whether you like it or not. My heart started racing again, because I knew what he meant. The folder, my name, everything he had on me. You built this, he continued, taking a step toward me now. Your friends, your students, your life. I just used what was already there. That hit hard, because part of it was true, and he knew exactly how to use that against me. That doesn't make it yours, I shot back. He tilted his head slightly, studying me, like I was something new, something he hadn't fully figured out yet. Walk out that door, he said quietly, and you don't control what happens next. There it was, not subtle anymore, not hidden, a threat, clear, direct. And for a brief moment, fear crept in, because I knew what he had. I knew what he was capable of. I knew how carefully he had built everything. But then I remembered something else. I wasn't alone. You already lost control, I said. That made him pause, just for a second, and that was enough, because in that moment, I saw it. Uncertainty, small but real. What are you talking about? He asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. Lena's voice filled the room, clear, shaking, real, confession after confession, everything, followed by Maya's, then messages, screenshots, proof, layered, connected, undeniable. His expression changed, finally. Not panic, not fear, but something close, calculation, rapid, sharp. You think this is enough? He asked quickly, but his voice wasn't as steady now. It's more than enough, I replied, and then, right on cue, a knock at the door, loud, firm, final. His head turned instantly. Mine didn't, because I already knew who it was. You really thought I'd do this alone? I said quietly. Another knock, stronger this time. Open the door. A voice, authoritative, clear. Everything shifted in that moment, because now this wasn't just between us anymore. This was real, public, exposed. He looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw it. Not control, not confidence, loss. You just destroyed everything, he said. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied, my voice steady, grounded in something stronger than fear now. You did. The knocking didn't stop, and this time he didn't move to open it, so I did. I walked past him, every step feeling lighter than the last, and when I pulled that door open, everything ended and everything began. The days after felt unreal, like I had stepped out of one life and into another, without fully processing the transition in between. There were questions, statements, long conversations I never thought I'd have to have. But through all of it, one thing stayed constant. The truth held. Because it wasn't just my voice anymore. It wasn't just Lena or Maya. Others came forward, one by one. Stories that sounded different on the surface, but carried the same pattern underneath. And slowly, what he had built in silence collapsed in the light. His control didn't disappear all at once, but it cracked, then broke, then disappeared completely. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe, really breathe. I moved out, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, everything. I cut ties with the version of my life that had been shaped around him, and it wasn't easy. There were moments I questioned myself, moments I replayed everything, wondering how I didn't see it sooner. But then I reminded myself of something important. People like him don't rely on you being blind. They rely on you being human, trusting, open, and that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something he took advantage of. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly things started to feel different. Not perfect, but real. I reconnected with people I thought I had lost. Some came back with apologies, some with understanding. Some just quietly returned, and I let them. Not because everything could go back to how it was, but because not everything had been broken. And then one day, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not loud, not overwhelming, just steady, calm, mine. And that's when it hit me. He didn't ruin my life. He exposed the parts of it that needed to change. And in doing that, he gave me something I didn't even know I had lost. Myself. He thought he was controlling my life, but all he really did was force me to take it back.